For 25 years, Tasmanians have driven through this tiny east coast town of Beaumaris and remembered this is where a young Italian woman was murdered, on a beach in broad daylight. Victoria Cafasso's killer was never caught, and Tasmanians have ever since carried the dreadful weight of responsibility for her death. She'd left her family and travelled across the world to what was meant to be a safe place. Well, now, 25 years later, police are working on a new lead, hoping to finally shed some light on her case.
The Italian tourist knifed to death while sunbaking on a deserted beach yesterday morning.
Everybody I've spoken to has told me these things don't happen in Tasmania.
And everybody here around the neighbourhood is pointing at him or him.
In my mind, I believe I know who did it.
For 2.5 decades, her face has been etched into the minds of Tasmanians. The 20-year-old Italian who once upon a time slipped into a small town.
She was a really nice girl, very outgoing personality.
And never left.
Early yesterday afternoon, a woman walking her dog on this quiet roadside beach found the near-naked body of 20-year-old Victoria Cafasso. She'd been repeatedly stabbed.
After flying into Launceston, Victoria came to stay here at Larby's cottage in Beaumaris with her distant relative Simon. The coroner said in the handful of days before her death, she had very little contact with other people. Sometimes she walked this way down to the beach. Which is what she did the day she was killed. It's believed she crossed the Tasman Highway to walk this path to the shore, where she turned right and headed south. That was shortly after 9 a.m. The coroner says around 50 people were on the beach at some point that morning, yet nobody saw Victoria attacked and no one heard a scream.
Victoria Cafasso's brutal murder has police baffled.
Victoria's injuries showed she put up a fight, trying to wield off the blows of a blunt object. After being subdued, she was stabbed 17 times. This is roughly where Victoria's body was found, in shallow waters around 50 metres from the site of what looked to be a violent struggle. The crime scene seemed to yield a lot more questions than answers. There were no drag marks to the water. 3 of Victoria's teeth, believed to have been knocked out in the struggle, were missing, and yet a bag of money and a Walkman and other personal items was found nearby. The way the crime scene was handled turned out to be a really sore point for Tasmania Police.
Establishment of inadequate cordons of the crime scene, contamination of the scene by the introduction of foreign objects, for example the tarpaulin used to cover the body.
Would we do it differently if it happened again? Certainly, we've come a long way in 25 years.
As head of Launceston CIB, Kim Stephen has carriage of Victoria's case. But he's not new to it. As a young constable, he had the grim task of picking up Victoria's Italian parents and grandmother in the days after her murder.
I have a very strong recollection of picking them up from the airport, the family. They came here to the station and did a media interview that day.
She stayed here not even a week, she came to die. Everybody I've spoken to has told me these things don't happen in Tasmania.
The following day I picked them up and drove them to the scene at Beaumaris and walked with them on the beach where their daughter had been murdered only 4 or 5 days before. It was one of those things you never forget, unfortunately.
6 weeks after his daughter's murder, Giuseppe Cafasso died of a heart attack.
Some say, he died of a broken heart, and as a father I could just imagine.
Victoria's family history led police early on to explore the idea the mafia was involved.
There was a suggestion put forward that at some stage that the family were under protection. We've had that checked by Interpol.
They also suspected a serial killer.
The murder was just a few kilometres away from where German tourist Nancy Grunwald was last seen 3 years ago.
The man who would 6 months later gun down 35 people at Port Arthur was even considered, but later ruled out. As clues emerged, so too did local suspects, leaving tourists too scared to go in and locals too scared to go out.
Everybody here around the neighbourhood is pointing at him or me or the boys and that, thinking they could be the murderers.
If you're a young male living in that area, you're probably going to feel very awkward.
The town of Scamander lies just a couple of kilometres south of Beaumaris and was home to the fisherman widely rumoured to have killed Victoria. But the coroner believes it wasn't that man and says the focus of police on him may have cost them the truth.
There was an alibi for him by other people saying he was in St Helens at the time. So, I mean, unless he was a miracle man who could run on water and do everything else, I can't say how he could possibly have committed the crime.
Don Jones also discounts later claims a doctor committed the crime.
He was deported after spending time in jail for threatening his wife with a knife. He then went to New Zealand but had his registration suspended after an inquiry found he botched operations.
He got into trouble with the medical board doesn't mean he was some crazed killer.
There's a clear line in the sand separating today's Beaumaris residents. Those who were there when Victoria Cafasso was murdered, they still carry the scars, not just of her murder, but of the intense police and media scrutiny in the weeks and months after. And there are those who moved there years later. Stuart and Judy Muir are the new owners of the Beaumaris Beach Guesthouse and know very little of the murder. Did it factor into your decision to buy here at all?
No. It was a neutral factor. We were aware that there was such a thing, but it was neither positive nor negative.
And to be honest, we're from a big city. That isn't daunting in any way.
Former owner Vicki Steers had the property for 5 years before them and says the beach always felt safe.
I've never been scared, and I've walked it at night and I've walked it during the day, so it doesn't worry me.
And what about business? Did that
didn't affect the business at all, no.
But St Helens resident Kathy Funt holidayed on the East Coast in the 90s and has a different perspective.
Every time, I've gone to the beach, especially in that area, I've always sort of had my phone on me and I have my dog.
It's 15 years since Don Jones handed down his coronial findings. He didn't name a killer, but has a theory.
What is your theory?
I can't tell you.
Not after 25 years?
No, not after 25 years. In my mind, I believe I know who did it. It's quite likely that her death was accidental. Well, I don't think the person set out to commit murder, let's put it that way. I believe that it's possible there was more than one person involved.
Do you think that the killer or killers are still in Tasmania?
Definitely not.
Kim Stephen is still working the case, collaborating with a University of Tasmania scientist on potential DNA evidence.
This is just one of the things that's come forward in recent times that they're saying with this particular exhibit, this could be a possibility that we might be able to do something with it. Let's have a crack. So that's where we're at the moment, so watch this space.
And he still hopes the long-standing $100,000 reward might yield fresh evidence.
We're looking for that one person that hasn't spoken to us yet, that for whatever reason has been hiding that secret.
According to the coroner's report, this is the first place Victoria came when she arrived in Beaumaris. A lookout over the beach where 5 days later she would die. A violent, awful death, one that apparently no one saw and certainly no one has been brought to justice for. 25 years on, police say it's not too late to come forward. Alison Costello, ABC News.